Hello everybody, I'm Mike Levin from MikeLevinSEO.com, and I'm here today to talk about the big picture of human communication, specifically SEO and social, and how SEO needs social in order to be effective, and how one can't really exist without the other. And our story begins with Metcalfes Law. Now, Robert Metcalfe was one of these electrical engineers who's considered one of the fathers of the internet along with Vint Cerf. And in 1980, he's credited with making the statement that the value of a communication network is worth the square of its number of nodes or components. And in modern internet terms, that means the number of users squared. And we live in a world with 6 to 7 billion people on it, of which somewhere up to about 2 billion are online by now. And so that's 2 billion times 2 billion. And that is about 4 quintillion value of the internet in terms of communication units, or whatever you want to think of it as. It's worth a lot. It is about the best thing humans have going for communication since writing and the printing press. So, to visualize that, we will need a graph so that we can show other things superimposed on top of that graph. Now, if I were to just draw from no internet to 4 quintillion, the page isn't big enough, the room isn't big enough. So in order to graph an exponential function onto a finite piece of paper, you use a logarithmic scale, so that your line can be looked at and discussed in a reasonable fashion, keeping in mind that this does not represent this gradual linear growth, but rather represents this almost infinite breakout value of the internet. So, with that in mind, you then put down here something that is not logarithmically scaled, which is your content expansion strategy on your website, which will have a similar linear line, but that linear line is in fact linear. So, you go about making content for your website, and you launch your site. It's one page. You add the next bit of content. Your site now looks this big, and this little bit is the new page. You keep making your website bigger, launching that new bit of content each time, and your site footprint does in fact get bigger, and it's more visible, and more keywords lead into your site. You take this linear growth and you map it on top of here, and how does your site look? It doesn't even register. You're lucky if you can even see the blue of the line. You are, in fact, as time goes on, your site becomes proportionately a smaller part of the internet than it was before, because other people are adding content just as quickly, and new users are coming on just as quickly. And no matter how fast you add content, you become harder to find because of competition, especially if you pick competitive topics. Starting to get the picture? Okay. So, there are some other players out here. Like who? Ones who keep pace with the internet, who are working at that same exponential scale. That would be your Googles of the world, who themselves, although not the internet, would like to think of themselves that way and perhaps even become that someday. There are other players here. I'll do them in different colors. Of course, one of them came to the game a little bit later than Google, but nonetheless has a tremendous growth rate that keeps it more or less in pace. And that is, of course, Facebook. And then in fact, there are very late comers to the game who are playing a big game of catch up, but it's looking good. How soon before they take over and become as major of a player? That would be Baidu, the Chinese search engine. So as you can see, the challenge of your wee little business or personal website even appearing on the radar is incredibly remote. So what do you do? Well, each one of these new pieces of content that you create is a URL. It has a unique address on the internet. I'll extend the content expansion out to here for the sake of drawing something up. So in SEO, what you do is you create something which can be seen by Google. But how do you get seen by Google in the first place? It doesn't find you. The crawler needs to find you. And you need to do certain technical things to make sure that you are essentially launching, let's call it a balloon, up into that stratosphere of Google. And your content has to have sort of a hook on it so that Google's crawlers can find your site and buoy your site up and then virtually extend its influence beyond that of what you did merely by publishing it. It's now in search. And each time you publish new content, you do the same thing. And in a perfect world, it would follow the same exponential scale as Google and the internet itself has the privilege of following, but we're not in a perfect world. Facebook is a much better sharing vector. So adding, like making Google aware of your site might inch your blue line up this tiniest little bit. You're a little more exposed. This is why the numbers, the metrics of SEO are a little bit less satisfying than people would expect. It doesn't give you the exponential boost. Well, as long as your site has a URL that doesn't change over time, that is also the same balloon and the same hook that's required for Facebook. Because if you put a share button on, or if people copy and paste your URL into Facebook, it now gets picked up and buoyed and gets a little bit more of a lift than it did before. And that has a little bit more chance of following the exponential versus the linear model, because it's tied to human beings who are on the internet, who are their own subnetwork within Facebook. And your content, your circle of friends is your own subnetwork within a subnetwork within a subnetwork. And your circle of friends times the number of friends is the value of your personal network, and you get it buoyed in there. Now, circles of friends are quite close and limited, which is why things like public publishing status under Google Plus is important, why Twitter is important, because the idea is if you make your content shareable in enough of these social networks that have high value because of their sharing capability, you now get a little bit more upward movement than you could any other way. Certainly more than you could with SEO alone, and you're more than just a blue line. If you have something that is really worth sharing, something that's really, really special, where the word should in fact get out, you meritoriously deserve this sharing, then you could join the ranks of the sites that are top of mind, that people talk about every day, and get the benefits of Metcalfes Law on a much larger scale. Because, you know, this is Google, this is Facebook, this is Baidu, but the entire thing is all human beings who can communicate on the internet. And so that's the big picture, and that's why SEO is a good flame to get you started. It provides the spark and the flame. And social, which provides the megaphone to amplify your message out. And the two of them have to work together so that sites that are really extremely modest efforts in comparison to the mega networks that are out there have any chance at all of building audience and becoming successful in the incredibly competitive landscape that is evolving as more and more of the 7 billion people on this planet go online and increase the space, increase the value of the network, and make all these little guys have that much more of a challenge in reaching their intended audience. So that's the big picture. Thanks for joining me. Please don't forget to share the video, thumbs up it, and subscribe. Talk to you soon.